Chapter 30. The Breaking Seal. Wind howled across the plateau, dragging ribbons of snow over the wrecked ridge. Keira leaned into the gusts, one arm shielding her visor. The storm had changed color, no longer white, but faintly blue, pulsing in rhythm with something deep below the ice. Behind her, Nico staggered under the weight of his pack. 2 clicks, she said through the comm. McMurdo beacon, weak, but active. He lifted his head. Through the haze, lights flickered in the distance. Not steady. Breathing. Looks like it's alive again, he muttered. Keira didn't answer. She kept walking. The station lay half-buried, snow welded to its flanks, antenna bent into a bow. The outer door was jammed half open, edges fused by heat. Keira forced the manual lever. It gave with a groan. A wall of warm, metallic air met them. Inside, the corridors sweated condensation. The hum was louder now, steady. 3 beats, pause, repeat. The pulse ran through the floor like a heartbeat. Movement ahead. Volkov stepped from the inner lock, helmet off, eyes rimmed red. Get in! Close it! Keira froze. Volkov? What happened here? Get in first. Where's Rowe? And Cass? Move! Volkov's voice cracked. Keira dragged Nico through. Volkov slammed the switch. The hatch sealed, muting the storm. Rowe sat on the floor, rifle across his knees, blank-eyed. Cass huddled beside a heater, arm bandaged, trembling. Smoke hung in the air. Keira looked from one to the other. You sealed it? Volkov's answer was flat. For now. Nico's gaze flicked to the trembling walls. Then why do I still feel it? Because it's not outside anymore, Volkov said. Keira's voice lowered. You think it got in? Volkov shook her head. I think it never left. Cass's voice cracked. What does that mean? It's alive. The base? Rowe looked up slowly. It's learning. Same rhythm, same pulse. Nico pressed a hand to the wall. The vibration thudded through his glove. Feels like it's breathing. Keira's jaw tightened. Then we move fast. We find what's making that sound and kill it before it finishes waking. No one argued. The hums swallowed the silence. They gathered in the command room around the central console. Screens stuttered with static, seismic data, dark corridors, dripping pipes, flashes of light. Keira laid the echo data core on the table. Identical pulses under the ridge. It's spreading north. Volkov rubbed her temples. It's inside the grid now. Mimics, copies, our voices, our faces. They learn every time we fight. Cass whispered. They're remembering us. Rowe's reply was hard. Then we stopped teaching. A tremor rippled through the deck, dust raining from the ceiling. A new pattern appeared on screen, 5 heat blooms across the continent, pulsing in sync. Other stations, Nico said. It's jumping the crust line. Another feed came alive, a northern outpost. 2 technicians before a glass wall, light blazing behind them. One turned toward the camera, mouth open, then the image burned white. Static. Every comm channel lit at once. A layered voice filled the room. Access, level 1. Granted. 3 beats, pause, repeat. Cass slapped the console off. The voice continued, through intercoms, through suit comms, even through dead speakers. Volkov cut main power. 2 seconds of silence. Then the voice returned, softer, inside the metal itself. Volkov's tone hardened. We can't contain this. We blow the site. Rowe was already moving. Charges are in the armory. Keira turned on her. Destroy it, and the data's gone. It's not data anymore, Volkov said. It's alive. Cass pointed to the monitors. Even if we blow it, it's already out. Tiny echoes rippled beneath the sea shelf. Volkov stared. Then we buy time. The deck lurched. Bolts on the lower hatch clanged in sequence, one, then another. Cameras showed the corridor glowing white, steam venting upward, metal bulging. It's pushing through, Rowe shouted. Volkov hit containment override. Nothing. A bolt snapped free, screaming across the room. A deep tone rolled through the structure. The station began to breathe. Out, Volkov yelled. Top level, move! They ran through flickering corridors. Walls dripped with condensation that glowed from within. Light moving inside the water. The air tasted of ozone and salt. At the upper deck, Keira looked back through the viewport. Under the ice, faint arcs of light spread outward, like veins. North, east, west, racing beneath the surface faster than any current. It's transmitting, she whispered. Volkov joined her. No, it's multiplying.
Outside, the storm had gone still. Snow lifted in spirals from the ground as if pulled upward. The aurora over the horizon shifted from green to white, spreading in slow waves across the sky. Rowe planted the detonator. Charge set. 30 seconds. The hum grew into a single note, climbing until it was beyond hearing. Keira stared to the viewport. It's not stopping. Cass's voice came small. It's calling the rest. The floor dropped. The sealed hatch below exploded upward in a geyser of steam and light. For one blinding instant, the whole station glowed from within. Every cable, every pipe, every pane of glass turned to white fire. Then the blast threw them to the floor. When Keira opened her eyes, alarms wailed and snow drifted through a crack in the ceiling. The aurora outside had gone pure white, the light pulsing in 3 slow beats. Volkov dragged herself upright, coughing. This isn't a breach, it's a transmission. Nico looked up through the shattered viewport. The sky itself seemed to shimmer, threads of light arcing outward, vanishing over the horizon. Keira whispered, Then the world just heard it. Chapter 31. The White Sky. Keira crouched beside the main console, its frame warped, glass webbed with fractures. Each breath left frost inside her visor. A light flickered overhead. Another went dark. Nico worked beside her, tools spread in the slush, prying open a panel that had frozen shut. A screw sheared, a small final snap. Volkov moved between fallen beams, her boots breaking a thin crust of ice with every step. A conduit dropped from the ceiling and rolled, trailing sparks before the dark swallowed them. Rowe stood watch near the hole in the wall where the antenna mast had punched through, rifle held low. Cold air hissed in, scattering paper and ash. Kaz lay under a torn thermal sheet, her bandaged arm trembling, breath fogging the air like smoke. Somewhere behind the bulkhead, a relay clicked once, then failed to start again. From deep in the structure,
A long, metallic groan rose through the floor, slow, exhausted, as if the base itself had finally begun to sink. Keira steadied herself against the console. "All right," she said, voiced hoarse through the mask. "Start from the top. What did we actually send?" Nico scraped a glove across the frozen keys, then smacked the side of the panel until it coughed a thin spark. The screen blinked, went black, blinked again, half stayed dark, the other bleeding pale light through cracks. He exhaled, breath steaming. "Not language," he said. "A rhythm. It latches onto anything that still moves. Clocks, heart monitors, comm loops. Once it syncs, it owns the timing." He looked up, face lit by the blue flicker. "It doesn't send a signal. It becomes one. Every system that's still breathing is keeping time for it now." Kaz let out a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "What does that even mean?" Then she shook her head. "Never mind. Something bad, I know." Nico looked up from the console, the flicker painting sharp lines across his face. "It means we syncing with whatever the hell's under us. Same thing that was at Echo." She frowned, not getting it. "There are two rhythms now, ours and its, and once they line up, it's the stronger one that keeps the beat. Think of it like a heartbeat, Kaz. Once you fall into its rhythm, you stop hearing your own." Volkov brushed snow off a melted console and pressed a gloved hand to the metal. "It used the crust itself," she murmured. "Not air. The whole planet carried the pulse." Rowe's jaw tightened. "So, whoever's left could be hearing it right now. Or already part of it." A thin sheet of snow drifted from the broken roof and dusted the dark screens. No one brushed it away. The faint hum beneath their boots kept time for all of them. Harrow 4. Keira leaned over the map. "Any sign of life?" Wind clawed through the gaps in the roof, scattering snow until it hissed against exposed wiring. She pulled her hood tighter, but the cold still found her neck. The console spat another burst of static and went dark. Nico slammed his glove against the frame. "Come on," he muttered, half to the machine, half to himself. The panel flickered again, dim, stubborn light crawling through frost. "That's it," Keira said, leaning closer. "Keep it alive." The hum deepened, almost a growl. Every few seconds, the lights gutted, the bass breathing in and out around them. Volkov knelt beside a half-buried relay and brushed away ice until her fingertips struck metal. She hooked a cable to her pack's battery. The connection snapped once, twice, then held. A faint image rippled across the cracked main display, a blur of grey, then black, then motion. Nico exhaled in disbelief. "It's pulling something. Feed relay still tied to Harrow 4. Kaz stirred under her blanket. "That coastal station?" "Yeah." Nico adjusted the signal with trembling hands. "It's buried, but there's a trace." The picture stuttered, a dome half collapsed under snow, its windows filmed with ice. Through the static, light flashed, faint, irregular, almost like blinking. Then a voice broke through, thin as paper. "Harrow 4. Containment breach. Still alive." The words folded back, reversed, then repeated. Volkov pressed closer. "Looping," she said, "but the timestamp's current." Nico shook his head. "That can't be right. Nothing should be transmitting now." Rowe stepped forward, watching the broken figures on the screen, two shapes behind glass, blurred and overexposed, caught mid-motion. "If they're human," he said, "they've been calling for help since the flash." Keira's breath fogged the inside of her visor. The sound of the wind faded behind the pulse running through the floor. She forced her voice steady. If they're real, they'll see what we do next. If they're not. She stopped, eyes on the broken screen. We'll find out how fast it learns. A section of the roof gave a slow, exhausted crack. Snow poured through the opening and dusted the console, half burying the controls again. Nico brushed it away, trying to keep the image alive. The static clung to shapes that shouldn't exist. For a moment, against all logic, the feed held. Then the light failed, and the ruin went silent except for the wind. No one spoke. For a long second, the command room held its breath. Then Keira closed her jaw and said flat, "Okay, first things first. Something's moving in the sublevels. What are our options?" Nico gave a dry laugh. "Something. Try an army of aliens. Understatement of the year." She rubbed her forehead, ignoring him. "Gas didn't work at Echo," she said. "We tried it in Annex 4B, the test that froze the valves. It was meant to sedate. Instead, it stirred. Pressure dropped. Lights went out one by one." Nico nodded. "They seemed to learn chemistry. You change the mix, they change themselves, and we've already seen them shift shape." Rowe turned the wrench in his hand. "So what actually hurts them?" "We can't really know," Nico said with a shrug. Rowe frowned. "Weapons killed them," he thought, "just not fast enough, and there were too many." "Heat," Keira said. The word sat heavily. "Flares stalled one," Rowe said. "A thermal charge glassed another. We scale it up." Volkov studied the schematic. "You mean fire?" "Yes. A ring of it. Force them toward the ship, then hit the hull." Nico's voice sharpened. "I can chain a thermal cascade, crawler fuel, welders, plasma cutters. Timed sequence. If the ceiling holds, it'll carve a corridor." Kaz stirred. "And if it doesn't?" "Then we bury it," Rowe said. "Hold on. If the ceiling doesn't hold, we're going to be buried too. How can we make sure that doesn't happen?" "We'll stage it. Stagger ignitions, remote triggers, and a manual abort if sensors spike. Also tethers and a secondary exit. If the ceiling goes, we don't bury ourselves with it." A deep rumble rolled through the shaft. Tools rattled from a rack. A pipe snapped free, smashing into the comm stack in a burst of sparks. Thunder cracked overhead, rain hissing down the outer shell, an impossible sound in Antarctica. A ceiling panel tore loose and slammed down beside Kaz's cot. She flinched. Dust coated her blanket. Keira didn't move. She felt the pulse again, not through the floor, but inside her ribs, her heartbeat keeping time with the thing below. A hot metal taste filled her mouth. "They started this," she said. "We end it." Volkov met her gaze. After a long pause, she nodded. "All right, we burn it. We learn while we burn." Rowe straightened. "I'll prepare the charges. Nico, rig the triggers." Nico was already digging through crates. "2 heavy suits still work. We stripped the crawler for tanks. 30 minutes for the first ring." He looked up. "We can isolate the vents, shut the intake dampers, cut the recirculation loop, and purge the airstream. Seal the zone and force the heat where we want it. The plan." The lights dimmed again, then steadied at half power. It wasn't much, but enough to see their breath turning to frost between words. Keira pushed herself up and scanned the room. "We've got one shot before they move again. Nico, you and Rowe prep the corridor. Volkov, you stay with me. We'll handle containment." Rowe pulled open storage crates, frost snapping off the lids. Inside, everything looked half dead. Tanks with dented seals, cables coiled in rust, a welder that stuttered when he tested the ignition. "Everything's frozen solid," he said. "Then thaw it."
Keira said. Nico found the heavy suits in a locker by the wall. The fabric was stiff with salt and ash, and one visor was cracked through. He patched it with sealant while the other ran a diagnostic on the compressor. The system hummed once, coughed, then gave a weak green pulse. "Still breathing," he said, almost in disbelief. Volkov spread a schematic across the floor, pinning it down with wrenches. Her gloves left wet prints on the paper. "We'll need 4 ignition points, east, west, vent shaft and the crawler bay. If any one fails, the heat won't cycle." "Then none of it will hold," Keira said. Nico snorted. "Can't have that." Outside, the wind screamed against the shell. Snow whispered down through open beams like falling dust. Every sound felt amplified, each one waiting for the next to stop. Cass stirred under the blanket. "You'll be sealing yourselves in." Keira turned toward her. "That's the point." Silence settled. Then Nico said, 30 minutes, maybe 40 if the welders hold." 30, Keira said. "If it's not done by then, we're already too late." She traced a line on the schematic, a circle around the lowest deck where the pulse readings ran hottest. The ink bled under her glove. "Here," she said. "We light it here." A groan echoed through the metal under their feet, deep and deliberate, like something shifting its weight. Dust fell from the rafters, fine as breath. Rowe looked up. "It's listening." Keira didn't answer. She rolled the schematic, slipped it into her pack, and stood. "Then we make it hear us." She glanced at the Hero 4 feed, still pulsing on the monitor. A drone sitting half a click out on the ridge, its lens streaked with ice. Beyond it, the flare line burned faintly against the snow. Lightning flared white across the clouds. The base groaned like an animal under ice. The crew moved through the failing corridors, collecting fuel cells and flares. The crack of settling metal followed every sound. The rope that once tethered them to the world above felt thin as a pulse line, stretched between them, Hero 4's echo, and the shifting dark below. They began to build the fire.
Chapter 32. The Fire Corridor. They worked in the red half-light, moving like ghosts through a station that no longer belonged to them. Nico had split the gear into neat piles: plasma cutters, welding cells, lengths of hose, a salvaged fuel manifold from the crawler, coils of det cord already taped into loops. Rowe checked clamps and couplers with a soldier's economy. Volkov tagged the ignition points on a flickering schematic. Keira moved between them, a quiet gravity keeping their orbits from flying apart. Rain still hissed across the dome above. The white aurora pulsed 3 slow beats, each one finding a seam in the metal underfoot. Time was running out. "Last call," Keira said. "We do this now or not at all?" Rowe slung the first satchel. "Now." Nico snapped the manifold shut. "Cascade is sequenced. It'll step down the galleries in 6 pulses, 30 meters apart. We light one, the rest follow." Volkov's eyes stayed on the screen. Hero 4's feed shimmered in a small inset. The same snowberry dome, the same broken voice looping like a metronome of dread. "Tarit Hero 4. Containment. Still alive." It folded back on itself and became the pulse. Volkov leaned closer. For a breath, the static parted and another fragment slipped through, thinner, as if torn from somewhere distant. Don't let it through. Then it was gone. Glitch, Nico muttered, though the word sounded more like a failed prayer. Keira pulled on her helmet. Cass, you have us? I've got you, Cass said, voice thin on the channel. Command room's holding. If I lose you, I'll assume you're moving. If I don't hear in 20, I start fullback protocols. Copy. Keira hesitated. Breathe slow. Don't stand under anything that looks like it wants to fall. Everything looks like it wants to fall, Cass said, trying for a smile in the sound. Bring me back something to make sense of. Keira clicked off and looked at the others. Masks tight. No heroics. We light the ring. We keep moving. If it separates us, we keep moving. They filed into the freight shaft. The lift had died an hour ago. The ladder was hot to the touch. They climbed anyway, boots ringing on rungs, air tasting of coins. The lower levels breathed at them, damp and electric. Condensation streamed down the walls like sweat. Somewhere, a faint alarm pulsed on and off, a small animal testing its voice. At the mid-landing, Nico dropped to one knee and fitted the first ignition head into a corroded junction box. He worked fast, hands steady, despite the tremor in the metal. Rowe flipped open a flare gun, checked the load, and snapped it shut. You call it. Light it, Keira said. Nico thumbed the primer. Fire bloomed. It came like a breathtaking sight. The first lines searing along the gallery, white core wrapped in orange skin, eating pooled fuel and weathered insulation. Heat rolled back at them like a wave. Farther down, the second ignition winked to life, then the third. The cascade ran in a curve, a ring catching and catching, a throat clearing to roar. The station shuddered. Vents coughed flame. The hum under their boots pitched up half a tone and held. Go, Rowe said. They moved into the corridor, shoulder to the wall, visors flaring with the light. The world narrowed to heat and thunder. The fire sucked oxygen and exhaled black smoke. The emergency fans woke, coughed, died, woke again. Every opening breathed. Reading spike, Volkov said, falling in beside Keira with her sensors slung like a satchel. Temperature rising faster than projected. The grid is picking it up. Meaning? Rowe asked without looking back. Meaning, it's listening, probably trying to adapt. The first shapeshifter came out of the light half-formed. It crawled from a grate as a smear of glass and gathered itself into legs, a head, and a chest with no face. Heat made its edges boil. Threads sloughed off and crawled back on, writhing like a school of fish. It raised an arm that wasn't an arm. Rowe didn't wait. He fired the flare. Magnesium hit the center mass and burst into a sun. The shape convulsed, came apart in slices of molten mirror, each piece still trying to move. Heat drove it to a liquid. The liquid bubbled and went dull. Keep left, Keira said, voice even. Don't let them flank. Another figure slid out of the wall ahead, almost human, shaped like Rowe's. Same stance, same height, even the faint burn scar across his chest plate. But its edges rippled like oil on water. Keira fired twice. The bolts punched clean through, leaving holes that sealed as she watched, the surface knitting with a shimmer. It's not solid, Nico snapped. He tore open a valve and flooded the floor with fuel, the reek of ethanol cutting through the smoke. The figure kept walking. For a moment, no one moved. "That's impossible," Nico whispered. Volkov's breath caught. "They're not imitating anymore. They're phasing. They've learned mass." Rowe raised his rifle, then lowered it. The click of the safety sounded absurdly small. "So nothing hurts them now?" Keira shook her head, eyes fixed on the thing advancing through the haze. "Something does. We just haven't found it yet." The figure stopped, head tilting in perfect sync with hers. The motion was precise, practiced, like a reflection remembering how to breathe. No one fired. "Back," Rowe warned. He sparked the line. The corridor went white. Flame ran along the fuel as if it had been waiting for permission. The mimic staggered, softened, then melted in a collapse that hissed against the plates. "Flashover," Volkov murmured, watching her readings climb. "And they're responding." "We've got company," Rowe said. They did. Shapes formed in the seams of heat and shadow, some dripping, some already wearing faces. One of them had hers. It looked up through the shimmer, her own mouth opening on nothing. Keira drew the taser. They hadn't adapted to that yet, or so she hoped. She fired. The thing shattered as a mirror dropped from a height. A tremor rolled through the passage. The ceiling warped and dropped a beam into our path. It hit the floor with a sound like a bell in the wrong church. Rowe knelt, swore under his breath, then slid his hands beneath the metal and heaved. Muscles cabled in his neck. The lift lifted, stuttered, rose another inch. "Through," he grunted. "Now!" Keira shoved a small tank through the gap. Nico flattened, slid under, came up already turning wiring the next ignition head along the far wall. Volkov followed and braced a shoulder beside Rowe. Together they held long enough for Keira to wriggle through. Rowe let it drop. Sparks coughed up from the floor. "Status," Keira said. "Ring 3 lit," Nico reported. "Eyes on his manifold. 4 goes in 10 seconds. Pressure is high. Blow back if we stand in the wrong place." "Not sure there is a right place," Rowe said. "Then stand in the least wrong place," Keira answered, and they moved again. The fire had found its rhythm now, striking down the galleries in pulses, each bloom answering the last. Where the flames ran, they left behind a skin of char, glowing at the edges and drinking light in the middle. Heat found old grease, old dust, old sins of maintenance. Everything burned as it had always been waiting to. They reached a junction where the corridor dog-legged and dropped. The great beyond glowed like a stove ring. Nico popped a hat and dumped 2 welding cells into the crawl space. 3, he called. 2. The explosion punched the air from their lungs. Blue flame sprinted through the crawl and blew a door off its hinges 50 meters away. For an instant, the roar drowned everything, even the hum under the floor. When it cleared, the passage ahead was a snarl of heat shimmer and falling ash. "Clear enough," Keira said, and they pushed on, visors streaked, suits steaming from inside. Volkov had gone quiet, head tilted, sensor humming. "Listen." Keira listened. Under the roar, a new sound threaded through, a modulation that shouldn't have been sound at all. It rose and fell in step with the ignitions, tasting like tin at the back of her tongue. "What is it?" she asked. "Communication," Volkov whispered. "They're talking through temperature." Keira's chest tightened. "We keep moving." They did. The corridor bent and opened out, not onto the cavern floor, but onto a grated catwalk at its edge. A rusted balcony built for work lights that had never been hung. Heat pooled and climbed. The ring of fire had reached the far side and curled back on itself. Below, the cavern was an eye rimmed in flame. The ship waited in the pupil. It seemed closer because it was different now. Its skin was no longer an even black. Lines had woken under the glass, veins running bright and slow, answering the fire with their own light. Blue slid to white, then to a color Keira didn't have a name for. "It's reacting," she whispered. "No," Volkov breathed, unable to hide the awe. "It's waking." The hum pressed a hand against their chests, not just under the floor anymore. It lived in the air, a pressure you could lean on. Keira's heartbeat aligned with it without permission. She gripped the rail and felt the metal purr. "Rowe, left stair. We go down slow. Nico, watch pressure. Volkov." "I've got it," Volkov said, eyes locked on the ship. "Seismic, steady. Thermal. It's doing something to the flame." The ship exhaled. A low-frequency throb rolled out, heavy enough to warp the air. The ring fire guttered as if cupped by an invisible hand. Every flame leaned toward the vessel, held there for a second, then snapped upright. Heat lights flickered and steadied. "Meaning it can breathe?" Nico said. Keira opened her mouth to answer, but the ship opened its own. Not wide, not dramatic, a seam along the curve, an iris, a pupil, a wound, unfolding by degrees. Black glass curling back from blacker interior. Light bled out like molten glass under skin. The pulse inside the vessel came clear now, spoken into open air instead of through rock and wire. Cass's voice cracked across the channel. "Keira, copy. Keira." "Copy," Keira said, eyes fixed on the widening seam. "We have visual on the pulse," Cass said, words chopped by interference. "It just went global again." Heat gusted across the catwalk as if the ship had taken another breath. Flames along the far galleries guttered and died in a smooth, obedient wave, snuffed like candles by a practiced hand. Darkness pooled where the fire had been, thick as smoke. Rowe raised his rifle by reflex. "That's enough waking." "No shots," Keira said, mouth dry. The thing below had stolen the sound from the room and left only its pulse. Nico swallowed. "Then what do we teach it?" Keira didn't answer. She stepped to the rail, stared into the slow, bleeding light, and felt it answer in her bones, and knew the truth settling like ash in her throat. The fire didn't kill it. It showed it how to breathe.
Chapter 33. The Open Eye. When the roar finally died, it didn't leave silence. It left a hush full of things that were trying to be quiet. Heat sank off the metal in thin waves. Smoke hung in long, gray veils that barely moved. The catwalk ticked as it cooled. Below, the ring of scorched galleries gleamed like a dark halo around the vessel, and the vessel answered with its own light, blue passing into white. "Kaz," Keira said, voice rough inside the helmet. "Status." Static scratched back. Then Kaz, faintly. "I'm here. I couldn't see the sky anymore. It was just white. No stars." Keira looked up through the fractured viewport at the far end of the hall. The storm had bled away. The clouds glowed from beneath, as if the world were lit by something buried under the ice. The old aurora's 3-beat had slowed and stretched. Under her gloves, the catwalk rail vibrated with it. It wasn't noise. It was a pulse. Nico leaned over the console they had dragged to the catwalk, visor blackened, breath fogging the plate with each exhale. He toggled a dead screen, then another, then a third that half woke and spilled a salvage of numbers. No active power left down here. Passive sensors only. If it wasn't already fried, it's singing along now. Volkov stood without speaking, her sensor unit cradled to her chest. She pressed its contact pad against the rail, then the wall, then the catwalk. Her face went still. "Everything's coherent," she said softly. "The beams, the bolts, the screws, the steel's resonating. It's not sound. The structure's remembering us." Rowe's mouth bared without becoming a smile. "So the base is a diary now." "Not ours," Volkov said. They moved back through the corridor that had brought them there, where paint had blistered into bubbles and insulation hung like scorched seaweed. The floor had buckled. Keira's boots crunched over a drift of glittering dust that had once been a light fixture. A monitor, dead, long dead since Echo, gave a sullen, impossible twitch. Letters burned once across its surface and vanished. Status, optimal. Nico let out a sound that wanted to be a laugh but wasn't. "Yeah," he said. "Feels like it." Rowe ran his glove across a wall and brought it away slick. Beneath the blistered paint, the skin was wrong, too smooth, too warm, as if the alloy underneath had learned to hold heat like flesh. He pressed again, and the wall gave by a fraction, then firmed, like muscle tensing under a touch. A seam had opened along the corridor where the heat had bitten deepest. The cut edge was not charred, but something like glass grown in layers. Keira could see striations, fine as fingerprints, winding up through the metal where none had existed before. "The ship's material has grown into the base," Volkov said. The hum rose half a tone and held. Keira felt it in the pocket behind her sternum, heard it in the spaces between the clicks and groans. She stopped, closed her eyes, and listened. "Harrow 4?" she asked. Nico pulled the small jury-rig display from his harness. He thumbed it on, and a square of bad television floated in the gray. The same dome stared back, the same interior wall of glass, the same two blurred faces, overexposed to white. They were caught in the half-frame of flinch. As he watched, the image jumped one frame. The faces turned toward him, toward them. He shut it off without saying why. No one asked. They descended toward the cavern. Metal under foot softened more the lower they went. The treads that had once been rigid gave way by a hair, and then rose again when their weight passed. Each footstep left a faint print of light that faded back to black in a breath. Keira breathed through her teeth and didn't look at the footprints behind them. The air grew cleaner without growing colder. The smoke thinned, the white blue inside the ship brightened in time with the faraway pulse. The smell shifted too, hot metal to wet metal, to something like oxygen with the edges filed off. They emerged on the lower platform where the catwalk met the cavern mouth, and the scale of the vessel was finally honest. It sat in the hollow, like the iris of an enormous eye, curved and patient, the eyelid around it seared black where their ring had burned. The iris itself was open now, a wound or a door, not wide, but wide enough to pull the light inward and breathe it out again. The glow spilling from within made its own weather. It lifted tiny ash flakes and dropped them again. It hid their breath. "Heat signature?" Keira asked. Nico lifted the scanner. The screen flickered, wrote symbols it didn't own, then went blank. No read. No depth either. The signal folded the data before the sensor could catch it. "Electromagnetic?" Rowe asked. Flat, like it's turned the air sideways. Volkov hovered at the lip of the platform, eyes narrowing, as if focus could make sense of the white. "There," she said, almost to herself. "The pulse frequency. It's at 65 now." "Is that good?" Rowe asked. "It's human," Volkov said. "Resting rate. It's breathing our tempo." Keira heard it. She could not stop hearing it. Her chest answered. Her breath wanted to fall into step with the rise and fall. She changed her rhythm on purpose, and the pulse waited for her to return. "Rowe," Keira said, because orders were the only thing keeping language steady. "You take point. Nico on your shoulder, Volkov with me. No contact unless I say.
If it moves, if the floor moves, we stop. Kaz? Static? Then still with you. Satellites are blind. The pulse is in the ground and the sea and the sky. If you go in, the line bowed. Her voice came back a fraction late, as if the cavern itself were repeating her. If you go in, you might not come back. We'll bring you something, Keira said, hoping she hadn't promised too much. They approached the opening. Up close, the hull was not smooth. It was a skin of interlocking plates so fine their edges blurred. Between them, capillaries of light pulsed in tiny delays, a river delta seen from too close. There were marks in the surface too, oval depressions like palms pressed into soft glass. Most were old, worn and shallow by whatever passed for weather in this place. A few were clean, edges wet with a shine that wasn't wetness. Keira lifted her hand without meaning to. She stopped a finger breadth away. Heat licked her knuckle through the glove. The plate beneath that almost touched breathed once. Don't, Volkov said. She wasn't sure if it was a warning or a plea. Something answered anyway. The pulse deepened, close enough to be felt as pressure against the skin. The light inside the opening quickened like a creature recognizing the noise you made when you came home. A faint wind drew inward over the rim, the tug of air that all doors made, scaled up to a throat the size of a house. Rowe adjusted his grip on the rifle. You sure we want to go inside something that just learned how to exhale? No, Keira said, but we can't stop at the door. Volkov's eyes stayed on the light. Whatever's inside, she said, it's seen us since we lit the first spark. Nico looked down once into the dark where their footprints faded, and up once at the white where their reflections began to have their own opinions. Old-fashioned then, he said, trying for a joke. Cass's lace plate through, stretched thin on the wire. Keira, do you read? The sky. Static. Harrow. Static. Don't. The cavern repeated a version of breath later, wrong pitch, wrong shape, as if it had tried on the sound to see if it fit. Keira nodded once. Stay together, she said. Don't touch anything until it touches us. They stepped across the threshold, out of stone, and into something that was no longer the world. The instant they crossed, the air changed. Sound dulled as if someone had cupped their ears. The hum was no longer underfoot, but everywhere. In the helmets, the marrow, the soft meat behind the eyes. The light from their suits didn't fade. It was absorbed, swallowed into the surface ahead. There was no darkness to push back against, only a light with no place to land. The air thickened, carrying pressure and warmth that didn't belong underground. Their boots sunk by a fraction into a surface that wasn't floor or membrane or glass, then rose again, leaving no mark at all. It felt like walking on the inside of a lung, soft, living, patient. Keira felt the vessel's skin flex beneath her weight, a slow, deliberate acknowledgement. The suit tightened against her chest as if the ship itself were testing how she breathed. She looked back once. The opening behind them had shrunk to an oval of distant daylight, a mouth half open to the storm. Then even that thinned, and the threshold sealed with a long, low breath. The hum steadied. The ship had taken them in. Comms check? Nico said, and heard himself half a second later saying, Comms check? Thinner from somewhere ahead. He froze. The echo froze.
He breathed in, and the ship breathed with him once, like humor, like warning. Rowe glanced back. The opening was still there, a perfect oval cut from light. The world outside looked like a photograph someone had forgotten to finish. He took one more step, because the only way to test a floor was to put your weight on it and see if it held. Keira sensed, rather than saw, Volkov tilt her head as if listening for a number that didn't exist. Something passed at the edge of sight, the way a thought passes before you can hold it.
She wanted to say wait. She wanted to say run. She said nothing. The light folded a little. The threshold tightened a little. The last sound from outside was Kaz sang their names, as if names could keep people whole. Then the ship closed its mouth to the weather, and the world went still. For the first time since the fire, the air felt alive.
Chapter 34. The Symmetry. The power had stabilized just enough for the lights to hum again. Cold air crept through the broken vents, carrying a smell of salt and ozone. Somewhere deeper in the vessel, water dripped at a steady, patient rhythm. Keira checked her gauge, oxygen holding, pressure stable. She lowered the visor lamp and swept the beam ahead. The walls weren't metal anymore. Not entirely. The plating had softened into something smoother, like alloy poured and half melted. Thin veins of light pulsed just under the surface, tracing patterns that shifted when she moved. When she touched the wall, warmth answered through the glove. "Feels alive," Nico muttered. "Everything down here does," Rowe said. The deck sloped gently toward the ship's heart. The pattern beneath their boots looked welded first, then stitched, metal and fiber braided together, as if the structure had once been torn open and healed wrong. Condensation beaded on the seams. Every few steps, a pulse ran through the hole, soft as breath. Nico crouched beside what might have been a console. It was the size of a table, its surface black glass, veined with hairline cracks. He wiped a glove across it. The residue was slick, faintly warm. When he struck the edge, the surface rippled outward like water. Lines of light formed, rearranged, and steadied into static images. Static lines twitched across the surface. The noise sharpened into shapes. Corridors, scaffolding, walls that looked too human to belong here. Then the feed stabilized. The image staring back at them was McMurdo's command room, its roof half gone, its lights dead, their own footprints visible in the dust. Keira's stomach tightened. "That's us," she said. "No," Volkov whispered, leaning closer. "That's before." The footage twitched, then looped backward 3 seconds. The same flicker of snow, the same drifting shadow through the doorway, over and over, as if the ship were remembering them in real time. Somewhere behind the wall, something moved, slow, deliberate, like a long exhale through stone. The pulse in the hole matched it a heartbeat later. Nico straightened, voice low. "It's not replaying," he said. Volkov leaned closer. "There." The bodies lay slumped near the control desks, still in their suits. The skin on their faces was drawn tight and pale, as paper stretched over bone. Their eyes had sunk deep. Their uniforms were stiff with frost, but not torn. Rowe frowned. No wounds. No burn marks. Nico switched to thermal view. The screen went flat blue. No residual heat at all. "They didn't freeze," he said quietly. "They were dehydrated." Volkov tilted her head. "That much water loss isn't natural." "They were drained," he said. "Completely." Keira's throat tightened. "Into what?" No one answered. The silence inside the chamber was as heavy as the air. "Keep scanning," she said. Nico flipped through other feeds. Storage, medical, the west airlock. Everybody he found was the same. Tight skin, dry eyes, lips cracked and white. It looked less like death and more like something had pressed all the water out and left the rest behind. Volkov's voice was small. "They took it. All of it. The ship's been feeding." Keira turned away from the screen. "Then we shut it off." They moved down the corridor toward the data chamber, the one with the glass walls that shifted like water. The floor flexed faintly under their boots. Every few steps, droplets formed on the ceiling and fell with soft plinks. Inside the chamber, panels glowed with soft light. Beneath the glass, slow currents moved like tides. Nico connected his tablet again. "Satellite feeds are still syncing," he said. "Last complete set is from 12 days ago." Volkov watched the data load. Cross-compare with last year's survey. 2 global maps appeared side by side. The difference was immediate. The blue ice fields were thinner.
blotched with grey. The total polar mass reading blinked in red text. Volkov read it aloud. Down 14%. Rowe stepped closer. That's impossible. No melt rate comes close to that. It isn't melting, Volkov said. It's being taken. Nico overlaid a live radar pass. Fine blue lines radiated from under the McMurdo outward through the continental shelf. Subsurface channels, they're siphoning meltwater. To where, Rowe shook his head. Nico looked up at the ceiling, where faint mist drifted through the vents. Here. They all went quiet. Keira said, "Can we shut it down?" "Maybe," Nico said. "There's a control spine under the core. It draws power through localized conduits, like arteries. Then we cut them." He nodded. "If we hit them with an EMP pulse, it might collapse the current long enough to interrupt the flow." Volkov's eye stayed on the shifting glass. "You don't know what happens to the system when you do that." Rowe said, "Don't care. We kill it before it drinks the rest." They descended into the core shaft. The air was humid, almost warm, carrying the scent of brine. The central column rose out of the floor, a vertical cyclone of clear liquid turning in slow motion. It breathed. Tubing and translucent filaments fed into it from every direction. Each line pulsed faintly, drawing water from the depths. Volkov raised her scanner. "This is the source. It's pulling from beneath the shelf." Nico unpacked the EMP unit from his bag. "Crawler batteries, short burst coil, capacitor pack. It'll hit like a hammer, one-time use." Rowe began setting small charges around the nodes on the floor. "Give me 10 seconds warning before you fire." Keira watched the column rotate. "What if this is the only thing keeping the planet stable right now?" Rowe said, "Then it's the wrong kind of stable." Volkov touched the column with her glove. Images rippled across the glass walls. Green fields, rebuilt cities, rivers that ran like veins. "They're repairing," she said softly. "Balancing entropy. By killing everything that leaks out, including us." Nico called out, "Ready." Keira glanced once more at the images. Perfect symmetry, no decay. "Do it." The pulse detonated with a flat, concussive crack. All lights died for a half heartbeat, then surged back dimmer. The column jerked and went cloudy. The hum beneath their feet stopped. Steam hissed up through the vents, then faded. For a moment, there was only dripping. Volkov whispered. It stopped. Keira exhaled. "Good. Now we find out who else is still listening." They climbed back toward the surface. The base above was half dark, half lit by emergency strips. The wind outside had gone strangely calm. Nico worked at the comms terminal, 3 burn panels and a salvage transmitter rigged to one of the crawler cells. "The signal's weak," he said, "but enough for a short burst." "Send it," Keira said. "Anyone who can still receive." He typed quickly. A tone beeped once, then steadied. "Transmitting." The message was short, automated, wrapped in coordinates and identification codes from Echo Point. It went out on every channel, still breathing. Rowe stood by the shattered window slit, watching the storm. "Don't think anyone's left to hear it." "Maybe," Keira said, "but we had to try." The wind pressed once against the wall and faded again. For the first time in days, no snow moved outside. Volkov straightened from the console. Transmission complete. Power reserve 23%. Nico adjusted the receiver gain. "Hold on," he said, getting reflection pings. "From where?" Rowe asked. "Multiple origins, ground-level echoes. Something's out there, moving fast." Keira joined him at the panel. The radar sweep showed faint shapes crawling across the grid. "Drones?" Nico shook his head. "Too big. Rotor-wash interference. Helicopters." That word hung in the air. Rowe went to the window. The horizon was grey, blurred with haze. Then a sound began, a deep, even thudding, steady as a heartbeat. It grew until the walls themselves trembled. "Visual," Rowe said. At first they were only shadows. Then the fog shifted and a dozen dark shapes came sliding through it. Low, fast, formation tight. Their rotors cut the air in perfect rhythm. 3 beats, pause, repeat. Nico's voice cracked. "Same pattern as our transmission." Volkov stepped closer to the window. No markings, no lights, nothing. Keira stared out. Rescue? Rowe shook his head. Rescue doesn't fly silent. The thudding grew until it filled the room. Frost shook from the ceiling and patted on the floor like sleet. The first helicopter dipped, angling straight toward the crater. Its hull gleamed dull black. No insignia, no flag. Transponders, Keira asked. Dark, Nico said. All of them. The first craft banked, and for a second, its underside flashed. Hard points under the fuselage. Weapons mounts. They're armed, Rowe said. Volkov whispered. Then who the hell are they? The radio hissed suddenly. A voice came through, flat, calm, almost mechanical. Echo Point Station. Message received. Hold position. Keira stepped to the console. Identify. Static. Volkov stared at the speaker. That's us. That's our message. Nico checked his log. It's bouncing back. 4 separate sources. The helicopters broke formation, spreading out over the plain. Snow whipped into spirals under their blades. The sound hit a physical pitch, more vibration than noise. Rowe chambered around. Keira, orders. Keira kept her eyes on the window. The lead aircraft dropped altitude, rotor wash tearing the snow flat. Figures were visible in the cockpit, faces pale.
Eyes unreadable. Whoever they are, Keira said quietly. They heard us. The radio spoke once more, softened this time, as if repeating a memory. Hold position. The first helicopter's side hatch opened. Keira's visor darkened automatically against the glare from the lights. Positions, she said. Weapons ready. Rowe moved to her flank. Volkov ducked behind the console. Nico's screen blinked once more, then died completely. Outside, the formation circled the base like a pack closing in. Keira watched the lead bird descend, rotors thundering in perfect sync. Her voice was steady. Stay down, she said. We're about to find out who answered. The noise swallowed her words.